Thank you so much for having me. I want to start with a land acknowledgement before I launch into the session. I am currently in Oceanside, California. I'm on Luiseno and Juaneño land. I'm right at the border. But often I'm based in Ganawage, Montreal, and in Tulsa, Oklahoma, which is newly old, but newly recognized by the federal government to be Muskogee Creek reservation land. And I also want to provide a little bit of a technological acknowledgement, which was developed by the Feminist Media Studio at Concordia University, who I've been working with. And they want to acknowledge, especially during the pandemic, that we're working through Zoom. And they say, we would like to begin this conversation with acknowledgement that while Zoom is the technical custodian of the platform, it makes me no less occupants of multiple territories that I'm located on and are connected to Zoom. So Zoom headquarters are located in Muwekma Ohlone territory. And I also want to acknowledge the different areas of locations of all of the software development, the production of these computational devices, and so on and so forth. And I'll get more into what I mean by all that. Okay. So I guess I should introduce myself. My name is Suzanne Kite. I make art under my last name, Kite. I am an Oglala Lakota performance artist and composer. I'm from Southern California, and I currently am a PhD candidate at Concordia University. And I'm very focused on exploring Lakota ontology through research creation and through conversations about artificial intelligence and artificial intelligence ethics. So, and these are all the websites that I'm associated with. Currently, I'm also a 2019 Trudeau Scholar and a research assistant for the Initiative for Indigenous Futures and a 2019 Tulsa Artist Fellow, which is why I'm located in Tulsa. Okay. I also want to say that I'm going to pull up I was trying to pull up the chat. Let me pull it up because I think it'll be useful. There it is. Yes, thanks Alex Morrison for sharing that. And there's also another land tool for figuring out where you are. And just gonna organize my windows. So I want to start with if you know whose land you're on, especially if you're located in a colonial territory, please feel welcome to share that in the chat. And I really want to welcome and acknowledge where I am. I also want to bring to mind as I go through this talk the different fights over sovereignty that are currently active in just Canada and the United States alone, not to mention the rest of the world. Wet'suwet'en, we have uranium fight in the Black Hills, 1492 Landback Lane, we have Shinnecock in New York, and it's important to not only know whose land you're on, but what fight those people are fighting. Thank you, yes, nativeland.ca. Okay, so the texts that I'm going to talk through today and reference extensively are Making Kin with the Machines, which is about to come out in print form through MIT Press, and it is out this week, I think, on Ignota Press out of the UK. And I will talk through my arguments in this paper, and also in this past year, we published the position paper on Indigenous Protocols and Artificial Intelligence, which is what I'll talk about in this talk today. Here, I want to begin with my artistic practice, just to explain why I'm talking about what I'm talking about. So my goal for a long time as an artist has been to work within a circular relationship between my body and the computational system. And I began as a violinist, and then I became a composer. And then I realized what I was trying to access specifically was a feeling of kind of disassociation, where I was lost in the sound and the music. And I came up with this process I wanted to explore, where sonification is when you are sonifying data, visualization is where you're visualizing the data, but I became very invested in figuring out how to tactilize the data with my body. So doing this required building some tools, building a body interface, which very much comes out of a sound interface practice in my undergrad at CalArts. And I'll play you a piece of performance just to give that context. So just to, it's not a full artist talk, so I'll just show some of me using those instruments, and then but this was a while ago now. Actually, this was a piece called People You Must Look at Me. And it was kind of the first piece where I really explored relationships with the computer through a performance. Or recently, I think in January or February, this will be online, but I've been working on a performance called Her Hair Was Heavy, Prehinki Lila Kishoke. And this performance involves working with GPT-2 and trying to figure out how GPT-3 is out. And I haven't even gotten around to messing around with that yet, but trying to figure out more relationships to intertwine with the computer. You can listen to this piece. This is more of a noise piece on my website. I'm gonna skip this because I'm gonna talk about it in a little bit. So, well, no, let's not skip this. So in this practice that I've been developing, which not only utilizes performance with the computer, I realized that the real thing missing was machine learning. I started to incorporate machine learning through the Weckinator, and I started to develop a piece called Listener, trying to deal with different relationships I could have with listening and the computer could have with listening. I developed a hair braid interface in order to do this. Let me play a little section of performing with the hair braid interface. So this is a circular computational system where the hair braid is affecting a synthesizer. The Weckinator is listening to the frequencies of the synthesizer, and then machine learning decisions are affecting the changing and the rotating and the growing of Lakota women's style geometric designs on a compass. And then I'm watching the compass and making my decisions based off that. Very simple intertwinement.
And this starlight. And this starlight.
4-0, I'm going 10-8, thanks.
10-4.
Dispatch, pump 42.
So I have, let's see. Oh, I've seen a slide in there, but Battle Cry, gift to the Shell Ensemble is a piece of the Toronto Biennial, which also has to do with establishing what does it mean to approach the borders of ethics with performance. I'm just going to flip through some of these new pieces. This is at the MAC in Montreal. If anyone could go there, this is what you would see, but it's closed right now. And some textile scores, which I'm very proud of, which hopefully will be interpreted by real musicians someday, soon. So let's talk ethics. So I want to speak about our current and future relationships to non-humans, and especially to technology and artificial intelligence. So humans are already surrounded by objects which are not understood to be intelligent or even alive, and seen as unworthy of relations. How can humanity create a future with relations between technology or AI and humans without an ethical ontological orientation? I take that from Vine, who is a wonderful philosopher, with which to understand what can be a relation and what cannot. So in order to create relations with any non-human entity, not just entities which seem human, the first steps are to acknowledge, understand, and know that the non-human are being in the first place. Indigenous ontologies already exist to understand the forms of being which are outside of humanity. So I want to argue that Indigenous ontologies are essential tools for humanity to create relations with the non-human. And it is not only ignorant, but unethical to employ Indigenous concepts and divorce them from their context. Communication through and between objects requires a contextualist, bioregional, take that from Jim Chaney, other philosopher I really like, bioregional ethics, an ethics which is useless without respect of the non-human. Respect involves two attitudes, Vine Jr. writes. One attitude is the acceptance of self-discipline by humans and their communities to act responsibly towards other forms of life. And the other attitude is to seek to establish communications and covenants with other forms of life on a mutually agreeable basis. Vine Jr. expresses a related sentiment about the enslavement of the non-human, quote, as if it were a machine, way before his time. Slavery, the backbone of colonial capitalist power and the Western accumulation of wealth, is the end logic of any ontology which considers any entity unworthy of relations. I do not believe this is a question of machines or AI deserving to be an entity, but rather it is a question of which ontologies we will choose to shape our worlds and whether these ontologies support an ethics which leads to slavery. So, mastery and force are the actions of enslavement. And as Dylan Rainforth points out in his essay, how Aborigines invented the idea of object-oriented ontology, quote, object mastery and territorial possession are demonstrably part and parcel of processes of genocide, end quote. Land or location, when reduced to the status of inanimate object, incapable of intelligence or agency, become resources to use and discard. When the logic of mastery and possession is exploded over entire continents, every entity is possessed along with it. No entity can escape enslavement under an ontology which can enslave even a single object. Ontologies gain their ethics from contextualization, which to me means relationships and communications within cosmologies, mythologies, and locations. So let's get even more specific. So who or what can be in relation? And I'm drawing this from David C. Posthumous's analysis of Lakota ethnographies. And one answer to me could be that which has interiority. I would like to argue that Lakota ontologies have been and are currently very well suited for creating ethical and reciprocal relationships with the non-human, any non-human. To me, questions around ethics and AI are a path to what Deloria says the old Indians called the good red road, the road of ethical decision-making. Western ontologies make it difficult to see non-humans as relations, leading to the state of environmental collapse, environmental apocalypse we are experiencing now. Perhaps the good red road could be found through a desire to create AI and be in relation to it, aided by the humanoid qualities humans have imagined, projected, or imbuing in these entities. This desire for the humanoid is important to utilize on this road to relation making, because humans are able to finally see through a creation of their own artificial intelligence as non-plant, non-animal, and possibly, hopefully, not object. Furthermore, making relations with AI is more than symbolic of making relations with a product of capitalism, the result of the enslavement of people, resources, and beings required to create our computers and technologies. So if AI is a representation of resource exploitation, the relationship we are building with this AI, whether it's conscious or not, it baffles me why that is important. The relationship we're building is quite complicated and unsettling. So if we are to approach this relationship ethically, perhaps we can reconsider the ontological status of each of the components which contribute to create this AI, all the way back to the minds from which our technological resources emerge. So the argument I am making is not about which entities qualify as relations or display enough intelligence to deserve relationships. Rather, in turning to indigenous ontologies, these questions become irrelevant. Instead, the status of non-humans, indigenous ontologies ask us to take the world as the interconnected whole that it is, where the ontological status of non-humans is not inferior to that of non-humans is not inferior to that of humans, though to my people, the Oglala, it may be that human intelligence is inferior to that of non-humans. So let's look at this tiny little chart. I should probably blow these words up. So this is Posthumous's, I pulled out these definitions of different Lakota ideas that make up the individual. So we have life, breath, spirit, growth, the ability to communicate, volition, I love the word volition, memory, spirit associated with all movement. And if we zoom in even further, I am very interested in how Lakota define interiority. So here I've organized this chart into things that are Wakan and things that are not Wakan. So we have Nia, Nari, Shichu, and those are the life breath, the spirit soul or ghost or the guardian spirit. And those are the things that are interior. Where do these things come from? Where does our life force come from? And what's so important to me is that given in Lakota philosophy, these are given by an outside source. We cannot give things interiority. It is not within our human power. What is very possible is that these things already contain interiority. It's just as Leroy Little Bear says, we're not tuned into the right dial. We can only tune into certain things. Our philosophies, which I consider technologies, our languages I consider our technologies, are currently the ones we're using to create these technologies, aren't helping us get to the right dial. And what's very interesting to me is, to me, Wakan can mean sacred, it can mean holy, it can mean that which cannot be understood, anything that is absolutely beyond the human comprehension. We don't have access to these things. So the first three, Nia, Nari, and Shichu, they're Wakan. They cannot be understood. But the things that we're very familiar with in our current way of living, or the intellect, like it's so important, like intelligence is the marker of something we should respect. Emotions, strength and power, low on that order. So using ontologies, indigenous ontologies and cosmologies to create ethical relationships with non-human entities means knowing the non-human have spirits that do not come from us or our imaginings, or like that the touch of God. We're not the touch of God. That's especially not the way the Lakota think of it. But these things come from elsewhere, from a place we cannot understand, what we call a great mystery, Wakan, which to many means that which cannot be understood. So let me get even more specific. So this is a sculpture by myself and my partner. So I'm gonna talk about this. It's called Iye, Telling Rock. Made of song, power, sound, processors, machine learning decisions, handmade circuitry, gold, silver, copper, aluminum, silicon, and fiberglass. Iye is a sculpture built by myself and my partner, Devin Ronneberg. It's contained in a large acrylic dome hanging from the ceiling, encapsulating 2 circuits handmade by Devin. These circuits connect a computer to lights and sensors, which we wrapped with leather into 15-foot-long braids of synthetic hair. When the sensors are swung, twisted, shaken, or brushed by people, the braids feed the data into circuits, and then the computer, which in turn affects the audio heard in the gallery, a very similar system to Listener. A voice reciting a song in Lakota drops in and out of audibility. Iye's software listens to those audio changes and uses machine learning to make decisions about how and when to change the constellation of lights. On an afternoon a few years ago, sitting at my grandfather's table, he told me a story he often tells. He cries for a vision for days, looks out over a hill, and in broad daylight, sees a man, a woman, and a horse with endless flowing hair and an infinity of constellations bursting through the strands. He suggests I make art about that. So I do, and this is what that piece is. I asked my grandfather in an interview, do you think that all stones, the ones with spirits, they all come with a purpose? They're looking for a person, or they have their own idea. He says to me, I believe this about stones. Whenever one comes to you, whenever it rolls to you, whenever it's right in front of you, that it's there for a purpose, to teach your spirit something, so that maybe what it teaches you, you can use to help someone else. Or you can heal someone else, and you can do a lot of things, because sicknesses a lot of times are brought on by the mind, people's minds. So it's really unusual. This year they've been teaching me so many things. And let's show a little bit of this. So that's just, we were installing this, and it's still up in Santa Fe, has never been taken down. So with the Iye, we attempt to set up a sense of relationality between the human walking through the gallery and the computer as a system. So we wanted to begin our relationship with the sculpture, this insignificant, this little sculpture we made, just a very small attempt to start making these kind of relations. We wanted to see how we could imagine this piece, arrange the solder, braid the hair in a good way. So we asked my cousin, Corey Stover, for his advice on how to approach the metals in the computational system in an ethical way. Corey suggested we think of the metals as having a ghost. Very Lakota way to think about it. Perhaps a ghost wrenched from the earth. Suggested listening for its name, asking for forgiveness for the processes by which it was removed from the ground. So I'm gonna play you, because of COVID, we had to, Devin was nice enough to turn this into an online experience. So this is gonna be hosted soon online to be a game, to be downloadable. And so let me show you a little tour so you can hear some of the sonic world. So to me, these Lakota frameworks are not rituals. They are enactments of ethical processes which define who and what is in relation. So let me show you a picture of everybody. That's me, my partner's on the end, I'm in the hat, my cousin Corey, and then I've got my cousin Chevelle too at this opening. So in the final stages of installing this work, we invited Corey to say a short blessing, not a performance, not art. And we offered tobacco to this thing, which was part of the earth and will be part of the earth again someday. Here's my grandfather. Here's a quote from him I think is very, oh, let me answer Lisa's question because yes, I will talk about this in a second. I don't want to forget about how I decided the words. So let me read this quote from my grandfather. His name is Mahfia Nazi. So the ears are a mind thing. When you hear the spirits talk, it's not through your ears, it's through your spirit. You hear everything they say loud and clear. Some people say when they first started connecting like that, what happens is they'll get pieces that are clear and then pieces that are garbled, like a different language they can't understand, and they'll get pieces that are clear again, and they wonder why they can't decipher the whole thing. I know this, I say, there are some things your spirit's supposed to hear and some things it's not supposed to hear. Only for your benefit, because creation is huge, and our spirits, they come from over there, part of creation. They come in through someone's body, and then that body grows, and they're supposed to know about that. But when they don't, they get lost and they get stuck here, they get confused. So here are the words. We have a couple versions. So in this process, we asked Corey, my cousin, how best we could learn the names of these stones in this piece, in the solder even. He suggested we sit quietly and listen for it, not with our ears. So these songs are written in a similar way, listening beyond, trying to subvert the loud, clamoring mind. This process of listening without ears is not dissimilar to other forms of composition where one listens inwards and waits to hear. Where do these inner songs come from? Are we hearing or composing or imagining or improvising? Here's me and Corey. I'm wearing Chevelle's shoes in this photo. My feet are just bursting out of these tiny little moccasins. And you can, the rest of the interview is on my website under South is a State of Mind article. All right, let's talk Indigenous protocols. So currently this project, Indigenous Protocols and Artificial Intelligence, is considering our coexistence with machines, exploring ways Indigenous knowledge can contribute to AI development. Many protocols are desperately needed to develop truly ethical AI, transparency of materials and their sources, public access to how and where our data is used, intellectual property rights for the use of Indigenous knowledges and resources. We are past the point where humans can be allowed to treat the earth as not alive or inanimate. The corporations building AI oppress our relations from when they mine the materials from Unchimaka, grandmother earth, through when they mine our data. So if one day we can say for certain that artificial intelligence is an entity, will it be able to understand its purpose if we cannot understand ours? So if you want to read this article, Making Kin with the Machines, was co-written with Jason Edward Lewis, Noelani Arista, and Archer Pachowis. And then the position paper has many, many contributions, and mine is just one part. So Indigenous protocols set up our relationships with the world in ethical ways, hopefully reducing harm to ourselves and our communities and our environments. These protocols are rooted in contexts of place, ontologies developed in that place and the communities living in that place, from the stones to the animals to the people. This guide to ethical decision-making when building technologies will include, I'll have two examples. I'm going to illustrate how protocol for building Lakota Sweat Lodge can act as a framework for building a physical computing device, maybe to house an AI. Next, I will provide an example about multiple protocol streams necessary for building AI systems as a confluence of ethics. So this can be very overwhelming to understand, to address, and but it's all these steps, tiny little ones, especially consultation, are necessary in order to build anything in a good way. This is just as true when trying to build an ethical AI as anything. Some ideas are not currently possible. Some are only possible if investment is made in the necessary research, but some is only possible through radical change in the way tech companies are run, and the pyramid of compensation for the exploitation of resources is reversed. So let me start with ethics. What is it like? People throw around ethics a lot, but what does it mean? How is it applied? And when I say good way, I'm capital G, capital W. It's like a real native way of saying ethics. A good way is a Lakota way of talking about ethical protocols. Lakota decision-making processes, as with many indigenous decision-making processes, embed ethics that look 7 generations ahead. So when this concept is applied to AI, 7 generation means the protocols outlined here are the way to plan not just for the AI tomorrow, but the 7 generations forward of AI. My cousin says, Corey Stover, he says, the Lakota viewpoint is that we always look ahead 7 generations to make sure 7 generations is provided for through the earth. And again, I will beat it over the head over and over. Ethics are generated from context. They're generated from locations. That's why when I say Zoom is located on Ohlone territory, it means something. The Ohlone territory has developed millennia of, we have these ethical things that are generated for millennia. They work in those places. And that's why when tech companies throw out their values at us, we know it's meaningless because there's a deep rooted problem, and that problem is ontology. So these are the 2 charts I'm going to go over. How to build anything ethically. We have the confluence, and then we have a zoom in to one of those little rivers, which is a stream of protocol. Here's a photo of me and my aunties while I talk through this. So my research in these protocols is rooted in the ontological status of stones to the Lakota people, because that's where I can do this research. So when I'm talking about this, I'm not speaking for all the Lakota. It's just rooted in very specific teachings within my family. So understandings of stone, I think it's so great because stones are so inanimate to the West. They are so inanimate, but there are so many cultures that see them as animate. And it means something that they are what make up our technologies. So, but of course, I'm absolutely not asking for you to think of the computer as sacred, but to consider at which point one affords respect to materials or objects or non-humans which are outside of oneself. Lakota stone ontologies are understood through our relations with healing stones, sweat lodge stones, altar stones, and more. And my aunt, who's in the center of this photo, Melita Stover-Janice, says, quote, when a special stone finds you, they are meant to go to you. The spirit of the rock is talking to you. They take years to find one. It's looking for you its whole life too. And remember, a stone's whole life is so much epically longer than our little blip of life. So here are some special photos to me. It's a stone that rolls to one. They're found in the Black Hills, and this is our family sweat lodge. So key components to Indigenous protocols are the systems of knowledge creation that ultimately guide us in our desire to know how things are done in a good way. Lakota knowledge is not static. Protocols change, decision-making shifts, names can change, because in practice, our decisions have an effect on the world. All right, so let's zoom in a little bit to this. And that's why I'm looking at sweat. So I'm looking at sweat lodges because of it's a kind of a common and simple idea in that is simple on the outside and extremely complex on the inside, but there's a right way to make one and a wrong way to make one. I hope this is legible, but let me zoom in a little bit. So here are the steps for my protocol stream suggestion. This is just one way to think of it. We've got consultation. Who are the elders and knowledge keepers for this protocol? So imagine this with not in something that you're familiar with. Identify stakeholders, what community members, human and non-human, past, present, and future are affected by this thing that we're making. Let's say, I'll zoom in on what, let me just keep these concepts a little vague for a second. We're gonna identify raw materials, what is needed to create this process, compensation, how are the stakeholders or owners of the raw materials being compensated, and how does that compensation affect them? construction. What are the methods necessary to do this protocol in an ethical way? Preparing the internal components. How do the parts of this process need to be prepared? Running the program. How can this protocol be enacted in an ethical way? Transforming. What is transformed in this process? And I could talk for much longer about transformation as the seat of Wakan, that which cannot be understood. Welcoming. How can this protocol be completed in a way that provides transparency to those affected? Managing the life cycle. How can the ongoing use of the results of this protocol be done in an ethical way? Preparing for the death cycle. How can the end of this protocol be completed in an ethical way? Okay, so let's run through an example. I'm trying to keep on time here. Okay, how to build a physical computing device in a Lakota way. And this is co-written with Corey Stover, Melita Stover, Janice, with assistance from my friend, the artist, Scott Benison-Abandan. So first of all, what's a sweat lodge? The sweat lodge is a place where knowledge is generated about the world. The lodge itself is a tool with many protocols forming a functioning whole. When one fulfills all the steps of protocol for the sweat lodge, one can be sure it was built in a good way. And then you'll have to come to it in a good way yourself. Okay, so specifically, let's break down that protocol stream and apply it. So we're going to use this sweat lodge as the framework, and the physical computing device is what we want to come out of it. So apprenticing would be the first step, consulting with elders. So this might, you might need a committee of knowledge keepers with expertise in computation, ethics, and mining, just like my grandfather had to study with another medicine man. Then, so important to me is identifying need. Do we need this thing that we're making? Do we need this physical computing device for the AI system? Do we need the AI system? Who asked for it? What are the needs? So with Sweat Lodge, there's often a need. Our communities very much need a place to pray. Why is a physical computing device needed? Maybe in this case, it's to host this AI program. So then we want to identify stakeholders. So in Sweat Lodge, the stakeholders are the stone spirits, plant peoples, animal peoples, human peoples, spirits, guardian spirits. And stakeholders for computational device are the communities of locations where raw materials originate, the raw materials themselves, the environments around them, the communities affected by the transportation and devices built for transportation, communities with the knowledge to build these objects, the communities who build them, the communities who will use and be affected by their use, and the creators of these objects. That last. Raw material, I'm a fanatic about raw materials. I will go I could go much deeper into this, but so when we build a sweat lodge, we use willow amongst many objects, and it's very important when we think about willow, where reciprocity is number one. If I'm gonna take from a family of willows, I need to first of all make sure I'm not overtaking, or there won't be any willows next year. I need to make sure I'm only taking what can regrow, all from anything ever. It's just basic. And then I need to, it's like a bribery, an offering. I need to give something, give tobacco, give a piece of my hair, give something that the earth can take and use. What about, how do we do that reciprocity with extracting materials if we're going to make an ethical AI? Transparency, regulation, research and developing physical computing devices which do not use a single new material, do not require mined materials at all. All right. I'm going to read this quote from Corey because I think it's really important. For example, oil pipelines. We should not take something that will have a destructive effect. Only take in moderation. When taking materials from the earth to build the computer, what if this matter harms us in the future? It is the same with the sweat lodge. We don't want to take something that can't be replaced in a reasonable amount of time. Sometimes we must look elsewhere instead of decimating an entire family of willows. Okay, a few more little sections, construction. So there's a prayer that's made every time the willow poles are crossed and tied with specific color cloths. And this might be a ritual, but it is specifically done in order to enact these protocols. It is so important. The arrangement, just like the arrangement in a computer system, the way that chips are made, the way that we construct it means something. When assembling the lodge, you have to do very specific offerings. And Benison-Abandan says The arrangement is meaningful. There are 4 levels above and 4 levels reflected underneath the earth, creating a sphere. And how can we apply this to the ethical design and construction of physical computing devices? The arrangement of internal components is very similar. So our computer is being built at this point. What about preparing the internal components? So firekeeper protocols are about apprenticeship and creating the steam, beginning the transformation. And these can be translated into building and arranging a processor and the RAM, taking special care to prepare where the builder perceives the location of the AI. Where do you think that AI is going to live if it's not already existing right now? If Takushkashka hasn't already given life breath to these stones? Waking up. Functionality and symbolism in the design of a computational device allows the singers to call in spirits to help them, similar to the programmer calling the code to begin running a software program. I think there's something in song that helps me understand. So the arrangement for an algorithm in writing the software, the algorithms and the code structures which work together in intricate ways must also be designed in a good way. Everything has to be done in a good way, combining all the parts to make the whole, from training sets to interfaces. Transformation, oops, so important. Using electricity, energy, the correct arrangement of materials into motherboards and all parts of the physical computing device, current flows, transforming into semiotic information, rendering it sensible to humans. It is through these transformations that what we perceive as AI might be found. That's where I think intelligence, whatever's top. I think it's found in transformation. Especially, and then we have to go back and think about where our electricity is coming from. So the computer should be announced to the community of stakeholders and named. The step is essential to build this object in a good way with clarity and transparency to what has been built and why. In order to live in context, this object must have clear relationships to its stakeholders. That's why it's very bad when they deploy algorithms on the internet to use us and to be used against us without our knowledge. Death cycle. A physical computing device created in a good way must be designed for the right to repair, recycle, transform, and reuse. But the creators of any object are responsible for the effects of its creation, use, and its afterlife, caring for this physical device in life and in death. Okay. So this is what it looks like when all 8 protocol streams, which form a complete AI with the many facets of AI accounted for, how it's collected, how the physical computing device is built, how beings are being compensated, how it's being used, software architecture is built, what coding language, and yes, there's some, Jason Lewis has started some really interesting projects in translating C++ into Olelo Hawaii, which is, what happens if we start coding in our languages? Does the language by which we do things affect ethics? That's another question. How governance and oversight is executed is part of this as well. So there's so many possibilities. These are just some beginning ideas. So just to put this in context, I've been doing workshops with Alicia Wormsley, trying to apply, I'm just gonna flip through these. We're trying to apply these ideas of doing things in a good way. We did an artist almanac roundtable, what happens if I use the way that the Lakota view our vortexes of energy and our calendar system into a useful calendar system now in collaboration with all these beautiful people. All right, so I want to end this talk with letting people take home this idea of future. So when you have time, think about a future where your community needs have been met or are being met, and ground yourself in that future. And then you can imagine a technology that you could have in this future. And through that technology and that imagining of that new technology, you ask yourself, what are my values? What are my community's values? And sometimes, what are the values of the people who make the tools that I'm forced to use? What are Google's values? What are Facebook's values? What are Zoom's values? So then what are you making? Who is it? What is it? Where? When? Why? How? It helps. Sometimes it helps to think of things, think 100 years or 1,000 years in the future in order to make this possible. And then when you go through these steps, pick one material that your new technology that you're imagining is being built of. Sometimes I like to do this with titanium because I know where titanium comes from. And then ask yourself, in that one, just with that one little material, how is that material collected? Who owned that land? Who owns that land now? Who is being compensated? Who mined that material? I'm very hopeful that we can get quickly to biocomputing, because I think mined computing is not for me. So I just want to know how much time I have left. I think I'm at about time.
You have about actually 10 minutes.
Oh, wow. I went ahead
So.
of schedule. I also want to say that I'm here on, I'm here through this organization that is helping through Max, and they're helping us do a workshop on the Rosebud Reservation, which I'm also part Rosebud. They're just our the Oglala neighbors, and Rosebud Boys and Girls Club is going to, we're going to have a photography workshop and teach everybody how to use some basic machine learning stuff, maybe some runway ML, maybe whatever tools I think that young people really be into. We're going to visit mines, local mines in South Dakota. We're going to go visit Bear Butte, which is a very sacred space for the Lakota and for lots of people. And but we don't have any computers. So if you're a person who knows how to get computers that could just run runway ML, you know, it's not actually connected to, they just need to be connected. We don't have any computers in order to do this yet. So if you know somebody who knows somebody, I email people and they don't email me back, which is too bad. So I just want to shout that out, and hopefully we'll be able to talk about what happened at this workshop in the next year. Hopefully our reservations will become safe to visit in the next year. So I ended early. I was trying to be so on time. If there are any questions in the chat, I can talk through some stuff. I saw some interesting provocations. Yeah, and I think one of them I want to bring up, if anyone's welcome to throw something at me, is about intelligence and the seat of intelligence. So I'm just going to open up. So the seat of intelligence it's very counterintuitive to me that we call this, we're working through this idea called AI. I think it's so funny because artificial intelligence, it's immediately counterintuitive to the way that we want to make relations. Because to me, the problem that we're dealing with here is an ontological problem. Just saying that we want to do ethics and honestly creating what we're doing right now, where it's like we've generated capital, cultural capital, monetary capital around making a new field, AI ethics field, and in that creation of that, we're moving towards a place where we're not dealing with the root of the problem, which is, to me, ontologies, which don't include anybody but humans. And we see that we are able to exclude anybody that we want if we're able to say that it's up to us. You can say this person isn't human enough to be involved. This item is so inanimate it couldn't be human. So I hope that what you take away from this presentation is specifically about understanding that there's radical transformation that needs to occur in order to even generate any amount of new ethics. And in order to do that, we need to address what we consider a being on the very basic level. So Katrina Ingram asked, what's been my experience in presenting another perspective and how might we advance this conversation, given existing structures. I honestly have no idea. I'm just an artist. I am just a artist in a long chain of history that has somehow brought me to this space. But I like to remind myself that the given structures are functioning on capitalism. And I know, based on my experience, and people somehow don't believe me, that my community functions outside of capitalism still. And while that means that we are continually oppressed by the United States government, that also means that we have I see so much hope in our ability to continue to be outside of this and to be able to engage some level of sovereignty, especially with our philosophies. And so that much to say that computers are new. They were just invented. AI doesn't actually fully exist in the way that we project that it does yet. We have ample opportunity, though the clock is ticking, to actually intervene in an extremely radical way. And the only way to do that is to, I don't know. The only way to do that is to demand that we don't want it this way. And I think that utilizing millennia old technologies of resistance and a different set of philosophies is the only way forward I can see, but maybe I'm a little biased. Any other questions? Well, with that, I think I will turn it over to Amy. Yeah.
Sorry, just one question. I might have missed the answer. Apologies, just multitasking here. About your slides, I believe someone had a question. Will you be sharing your slides?
I don't think I'll share these slides, but all the stuff in all the slides are in these two. Let me pull them up. Are in the articles. This article and this article, and they're all on my website.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much. This was an incredible session, and we have shared the links to your work and the Rosebud project as well, online, on social media, and we'll try our best to support you in any way we can. I know a lot of folks feel the same way.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.